After the original Final Fantasy title sold over 500,000 copies in Japan, it really didn't take long for Squaresoft to capitalize on this success with a sequel. Final Fantasy II was released for the NES in 1988, only a year after the original, and although it received some pretty decent reviews in Japan at the time, it is now widely considered the weakest in the series. Personally, I'm in agreement with the general consensus here. Final Fantasy II did quite a few things differently, but with this came a fair share of problems that will drive you insane. However, I know that there's quite a few people out there who are interested in seeing how this series started, for better or for worse, and it's to those people that I say, this is nearly the perfect way to experience Final Fantasy II. Before we get into the review, if you like this video, it would help me out a lot if you hit the like button an odd number of times. Hitting it once would be the perfect amount. Hitting it twice would take away the original like. 3 times though is a really good amount. Besides, I want to kill this YouTube algorithm, so it'll help me out with that. Also, I'll be reviewing all of these remasters, so if you want to see more, there's a friendly little sub button near that like button that you'll hopefully hit an odd number of times. Alright, let's get into it. When compared to the original Final Fantasy released a year prior, it is clear that Squaresoft placed a little more focus on the story this time around. For starters, the main characters are actually named this time and have vocal cords. With that said, they don't exactly put these voices to good use, as their dialogue is very basic and the characterization is something that you would expect from an 80s game. Let's get to the introductions. First, we have the main protagonist, Firion, who is a generic hero that wants to protect his country. Then we have Maria, who is your typical kind-hearted female sidekick. And finally, Guy, the brute who can't speak English properly but can speak to animals. Why? Why not? And then there's the 4th party member slot, who is taken by a range of characters who come and go as you progress through the narrative. One of the most unique features is the keyword system, and this is a requirement to advance the plot. Basically, by talking to the main NPCs, you can learn keywords. These keywords can then be used on other NPCs to activate some dialogue that will progress the story. The idea in itself isn't horrible, it's just that I felt the implementation was unnecessary. Most of the time, I just found myself wasting time trying every keyword on every NPC, hoping to receive some vital clues regarding where to go next. Not knowing where to go was a recurring issue for me. At times, FF2 really doesn't give you much to go on, and I often found myself traveling from town to town hoping that I'd talk to the correct NPC. Yep, there is a lot of backtracking in this game, and this is made particularly frustrating by the ridiculous encounter rate. This was absolutely the worst part of the Final Fantasy II experience for me. This pixel remaster adds so many quality of life features, yet the one feature that significantly reduced the quality of my life was the insane encounter rate. At one point, I experimented with a mod to halve and to remove the encounter rate completely, and this greatly enhanced my enjoyment of the game. Unless you're completely dead set on experiencing FF2 like it was meant to be experienced, then I strongly recommend doing the same. With that said, if you were dead set on experiencing the true Final Fantasy II, then you should play the NES version. The major new features brought into the Final Fantasy II Pixel Remaster are the same as in the FF1 Remaster. Aside from the font issues that I mentioned in my FF1 review, which can be manually fixed, these updates are all great. The visuals have had an overhaul and look beautiful, and the soundtrack has been completely redone and it sounds better than it ever has. Add this to the load of quality of life enhancements such as quick and autosave, the speedy auto battle functions, and the addition of maps, and this makes it the best version of Final Fantasy II. But as good as these additions may be, they still don't save the game from the loads of mechanical flaws. Let's start with the combat. This core system is basic and pretty similar to Final Fantasy I. Your damage dealers will attack and your magic users will cast spells. The only real new addition is that characters can now dual wield weapons to increase damage output. In this pixel remaster, there's also been a change to the enemy attack patterns. In the past, they were on a set rotation. Now, their attack patterns are completely randomized. Yeah, this means that a mob of bomb enemies could now all self-destruct on their first turn, annihilating your party in the process. But hey, that's fine, there's autosave now. Alright, now let's get into the issues. Firstly, we have one of the most frustrating bugs that I've ever encountered in a video game, which is exclusive to this Pixel Remaster. This is the reason why it's only nearly the perfect way to play this game. Enemy attacks now have a 100% chance to inflict status abnormalities, making certain mobs of enemies close to impossible to beat. These fucking antlions, for instance, paralyze your party every time they attack. Then there's enemies that have a 100% chance to inflict death every single time they attack. Imagine having this mob of enemies ambush you. Game over. This is every JRPG gamer's worst nightmare. The other major issue that I had with FF2's combat is the randomness in the damage that your characters will dish out and receive. Now, I'm sure there is some super advanced algorithm designed by some really smart guy with a calculus degree, but to put it bluntly, it's a pretty shitty algorithm and said person should not be mathing for a living. I mean, when your character deals 50 damage one round, then 500 the next, you know something ain't right. This kind of inconsistent damage happens all the time, and yes, it was confusingly annoying, but it was never really the difference between life and death. You see, like the FF1 Pixel Remaster, this version is a lot easier than OG FF2, and you'll naturally become overpowered just through the insane amounts of encounters that you're forced into. Also, like the FF1 Pixel Remaster, there is a massive difficulty spike towards the end of the game, especially with the final boss. This could either be a complete pain in the ass or a complete cakewalk if you find a certain sword that deals damage based on the enemy's maximum HP. This single weapon basically reduces the late game from WTF hard mode into snoozy easy mode. This is horrible game design. It's clear that the developers of FF2 were out there to try some new things, and perhaps this is most evident with the game's bizarre leveling system. Rather than having typical character classes and levels, characters in FF2 will level up specific stats based on their use in battle. I mean, this does make sense. The more you do something, the better you'll get at it. I drink a lot of beer and I consider myself very good at it. Tasty beverages aside, using magic in battle will increase your intelligence, while physically attacking will increase your strength. There has also been a bit of a running joke surrounding the original FF2 mechanics, where to increase your HP, you could just hit yourself over and over again. In the Pixel Remaster, HP seems to level up randomly, regardless of whether you've lost it in battle or not. These leveling mechanics also applies to magic spells. Each spell that you teach a character starts at level 1 and consumes 1 MP. Through use, spells will increase in level, which not only makes them more effective in battle, but also increases the amount of NP required to cast it. I was not a fan of this at all. Not only does it take a lot of grinding to level up spells, but sometimes you don't really want to level up spells at all. Here's what I mean. Let's say Maria has leveled up Azuna to level 10 through using it over and over again through the game. Now let's say Firion becomes poisoned. I would have to use my level 10 Azuna and spend 10 MP to cure this poison status when it could have been done for 1 MP had it been at a lower level. A simple fix for this would be the option to choose which level of a spell you wish to cast, but nope, not an option. This is also really poor game design. But it doesn't stop here. Next, we have the upgrading of weapon types. In FF2, there are no classes. Instead, the weapons and the actions you take in battle will determine your class. Because of this, all characters can always equip every piece of equipment. This is fine, except for the brutal hidden statistics within this equipment. For instance, equipping heavy armor and swords significantly reduces the damage output of black magic spells. The issue isn't that it reduces the statistics, it's that the values are hidden. I spent much of the game equipping stuff to my mage that reduced her attack power. I am so glad that I ended up going onto the internet to work this one out. To be completely honest, I really do like the idea behind this leveling system, but there are way too many problems here for it to be fun. I was hoping that this version would have had a little bit more tweaking, but it didn't. Despite the fresh coat of paint and the mechanical tweaks, Final Fantasy II is still quite clearly the worst Final Fantasy in the series. Way back in the day, this game did quite a few things to try to move the series forward, but these evolutions don't quite hit home. The character's individual stat and magic growth mechanics are a good idea in theory, but the flaws here soon stand out. The exclusive Pixel Remaster bug that causes a 100% chance of enemies inflicting status abnormalities also causes caused many moments of frustration. But it's the insane encounter rate that I struggled with the most. I handled this fine while playing the other Pixel remasters, but FF2 is on a whole nother level. If you're going to play this game, it's going to be because you want to see where this amazing series started over 30 years ago. And while this Pixel remaster is not the perfect version of the game, it's still the best way to play it. The many Pixel remaster updates not only make the game look pretty and sound great, but also adds many quality of life additions, making the gameplay a more enjoyable experience than it was 30 years ago. I recommend playing the FF2 Pixel remaster only if you want to experience the early releases in the series. What did you think of this remaster and the game in general? Let me know in the comments below, and also help me beat the final boss of YouTube, the evil algorithm, by hitting that like button. This was Hellfire RPGs, thanks for watching. Did you know that the Quarrel enemy that originated in Final Fantasy II is based on the alien creature from the 1939 short story Black Destroyer by A.E. Van Vogt? There's loads of awesome facts like this in my Final Fantasy II Know the Facts video. Check it out if you want to learn a lot of useless trivia. Also, if you want more FF and RPG content, make sure you sub. There'll be a review for the FF3 Pixel Remaster coming soon, so stay tuned. See you next time.